The hotel lobby was sleek, modern, impersonal, just like every other business trip I'd taken. I checked my watch. Right on schedule. Meetings in the morning, conference in the afternoon, dinner with colleagues in the evening. A well-oiled machine. No surprises. No distractions. That's how I liked it. The restaurant was dimly lit, the low hum of conversation blending with the clinking of silverware and glasses. My colleagues were laughing, discussing market trends, clients, and the usual corporate nonsense. I played along, nodding at the right moments, sipping my wine. And then I saw him. Took me a second to recognize him. He wasn't the man I remembered. Leaner now, more refined, exuding an effortless confidence that wasn't there before. His posture was relaxed, his presence magnetic. Our eyes met, and for a split second the room faded into the background. "Didn't expect to see you here," he said, his voice smooth, familiar yet different. A polite smile. A casual remark. Just small talk. But as the evening stretched on, conversation flowed like we hadn't lost years between us. My colleagues faded away. It was just us. Then for a brief moment his hand brushed against mine. A simple touch. A spark that shouldn't have been there. I laughed it off. But deep inside something had shifted. And I knew it wasn't going away. I closed the hotel room door behind me, exhaling sharply, my pulse still unsteady. It was nothing. Just an old acquaintance, a friendly conversation, a brief moment that meant absolutely nothing. I kicked off my heels, ran a hand through my hair and tried to push it out of my mind. But as I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, I could still feel the ghost of his touch on my skin. It was ridiculous. I was exhausted, that was all. A long day, a few drinks, nostalgia playing tricks on me. Sleep would fix this. By morning it would be forgotten. The vibration of my phone jolted me awake. Squinting at the screen, my breath caught. One message. Short. Simple. "You felt it too, didn't you?" My fingers hesitated over the keyboard. No. I hadn't felt anything. I typed, then deleted. And again. Finally I settled on the safest answer. "It was just nice to catch up." His reply came instantly. "Then we should do it again." I tightened my grip on the phone. My heartbeat quickened. And before I could stop myself, I agreed. The cafe smelled like roasted coffee beans and fresh pastries, just like it had years ago. Nostalgia wrapped around me as I sat across from him, fingers curled around a warm mug, pretending this was just a casual meeting. We talked about everything and nothing, work, travel, old memories, but beneath the words something pulsed, unspoken and undeniable. His eyes never left mine, and every time he leaned in I felt my pulse stutter. I told myself it was harmless, just a conversation between old friends, but the air between us was thick, suffocating. Then he said it. "You're not happy, are you?" I opened my mouth, ready to laugh it off, to argue, to say something that would make it all disappear. But the words never came. A sudden gust of wind knocked my umbrella from the table, and before I could react, he caught it, his other hand instinctively wrapping around my wrist. Our eyes locked. The world blurred. I should have pulled away. I didn't. His lips brushed against mine, fleeting, electric. 1 second. And just like that, everything changed. The front door clicked shut behind me, and the scent of home wrapped around me. Laundry detergent, fresh coffee, the faintest trace of his cologne. Everything was the same, yet nothing felt right. He looked up from the couch, smiling, easy, familiar. "Hey, you're back early." His voice was warm, steady. I nodded, forcing a smile, stepping into his embrace, but the second his arms wrapped around me, my body tensed. It was subtle, but I felt it. A hesitation that had never been there before. I told myself it was exhaustion. A long trip, too much work, not enough sleep. Nothing more. But when he pressed a kiss to my temple, I felt nothing. No warmth, no spark. Just an absence. And all I could think about was the way my skin had burned hours ago when someone else had touched me. I pushed the thought away, buried it deep. It was a mistake. A moment of weakness. I told myself I would forget. But as the night stretched on, as he slept peacefully beside me, I lay awake, reliving a kiss I was supposed to erase. The sound of sizzling butter filled the kitchen as he stood by the stove, flipping something in the pan, humming softly under his breath. "Figured you'd be tired, so I made dinner," he said, glancing over his shoulder with that same easy smile. I smiled back, too quickly, too practiced. "That sounds perfect." We sat together, talked about our days. His meetings, my trip, things we'd normally discuss without effort. But something felt off. His eyes lingered too long, his brow creased slightly as if he sensed something was different but couldn't quite name it. I forced laughter at the right moments, reached for his hand across the table, told myself I was imagining it. Later, as we stood in the dim kitchen, he leaned in, pressing his lips to mine. I kissed him back, slow, deliberate, waiting for the familiar feeling of comfort, of home. But as his hands rested on my waist, as his breath mixed with mine, I felt nothing but distance. I told myself it was exhaustion. Stress. A phase. But as I pulled away, forcing another smile, I knew I was lying. His message came in the middle of the day. Meet me at the park. Just to talk. I stared at the screen, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. I should say no. I should ignore it. Instead I typed, I can't. He replied instantly. You can. The air was crisp when I arrived, the late afternoon sun filtering through the trees, painting everything gold. He was already there, leaning against a bench, watching me approach. I kept my distance, arms crossed, trying to act like this was nothing. This is a mistake. My voice was steadier than I felt. He exhaled, shaking his head. I don't want to lose you. A bitter laugh slipped from my lips. You don't have me. But the way he looked at me, steady, certain, like he already knew the truth, made my chest tighten. I wanted to deny it, to walk away. But when he stepped closer, when his fingers brushed mine, I realized something terrifying. I wasn't in control anymore. This wasn't just a mistake. It was something I couldn't stop. I barely heard what he was saying. My phone vibrated on the table and my fingers twitched toward it before I caught myself. I forced my eyes back to him, nodding at something I hadn't fully registered. He was talking about weekend plans, a friend's barbecue, something about fixing the sink. I smiled, pretending to listen, but my mind was elsewhere. When I finally checked my phone, the message was simple. Thinking about you. A slow warmth crept up my spine. I bit my lip, thumbs hovering over the keyboard, before typing a quick reply. You shouldn't. But I didn't mean it. Who's that? His voice cut through the air, casual but firm. My breath caught as I locked the screen too fast. Just a colleague. His eyes lingered on me just long enough for my pulse to quicken. He didn't press, didn't accuse. But I saw it, the brief flicker of something unfamiliar. Doubt. Suspicion. A seed planted, waiting to grow. I laughed, reached for his hand, kissed his cheek like nothing had changed. But we both felt it. Something had. The summer heat was unbearable and I was desperate for something refreshing. Standing in the kitchen, I wiped the sweat from my forehead as I struggled to cut through the thick rind of the fruit. Do it with me hard before my husband gets back, or don't you want to? I muttered in frustration, gripping the knife tighter. The melon was firmer than expected, resisting every attempt to slice it open. Finally, with one last push, the blade sank in, splitting the fruit in two. The sweet aroma filled the room as I admired my work. Turning to my friend who had been watching the whole struggle, I smirked. Do you want to try my melons? I asked playfully, holding up a perfectly cut slice. A few hours later, I was in a restaurant across town, breaking a promise I had made to myself. One last time I had told him. Just to say goodbye. But the second I saw him, I knew I was lying. Conversation melted away, tension thickened, and when he leaned in, I let him. The kiss was slow, deep, impossible to ignore. And then over his shoulder I saw him. My husband. Standing frozen on the sidewalk, watching. My stomach dropped. It was too late. He had seen everything. The house was dark when I stepped inside, but I could feel him before I saw him. He was waiting. I hesitated in the doorway, my breath uneven, my pulse a steady drum in my ears. When I finally looked up, he was standing by the kitchen table, arms crossed, face unreadable except for his eyes, cold, sharp, cutting through me like glass. Where were you? His voice was calm, too calm. I swallowed hard. Dinner with colleagues. The words tasted like ash. He didn't blink, didn't move. Just reached for his phone and placed it on the table, screen facing up. The photos stared back at me, grainy, distant, but undeniable. My lips on another man's. My hands gripping his shirt. My betrayal frozen in time. A sharp inhale filled the silence, but I wasn't sure if it was his or mine. I wanted to speak, to explain, to fix something that was already shattered. But there was nothing to say. He knew. I knew. The only sound left was the steady ticking of the kitchen clock, marking the seconds of a life that had just collapsed. He stood there for what felt like forever, staring at me like he was trying to recognize the woman he had married. Then without a word he grabbed his keys from the counter. The metallic clink echoed through the room louder than it should have been. I need time to think. His voice was hollow, detached, already gone. The front door clicked shut behind him, and just like that he was no longer mine. I sank into the chair, my fingers trembling as I unlocked my phone. No messages. I typed out a quick text, hesitated, then hit send. I need to see you. Minutes passed. Then an hour. Nothing. I sent another. Please. Still nothing. I tossed the phone onto the table, my chest tightening as the realization settled deep into my bones. He wasn't coming. Neither of them were. The apartment was silent. Too silent. The clock ticked, the refrigerator hummed, but none of it filled the hollow space inside me. I had gambled everything, my marriage, my stability, my life, and lost. No excuses. No second chances. Just me alone with the wreckage I had created.